You're listening to I Love It When, and I'm your host, Mo. I'm a speaker, coach, and connector. You're in the right place if you're looking for some inspiration and you're ready to truly embrace who you are. My intention with this podcast is to help you see that you are so much more powerful than you realize. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of I Love It When. My name is Margaret Smith. I go by Mo, and I'm your host. And on today's episode, we have a very special guest. It's actually my mom, Mary Smith. And, it's so much fun to have my mom on my podcast. And it always takes a little bit of cajoling because she can be a little bit nervous. But when you're just in a room with just the two of us and our podcast producer, I got her to say yes. And there's a very specific reason why I have her on the podcast. And if I could, I would actually have her out speaking in front of crowds of people. But she has told me that no, she doesn't want to do that. And so I figured this is the next best thing. So there are 3 topics that we cover today in the podcast. And the first is family and raising kids. The second is networking. And the third one is being you and becoming you. So I'm a very observant person. And I think if you have kids also, I don't have kids, but if you have kids, you recognize at some point that they are like sponges and they watch everything and they soak it up and they're watching you even when you don't think they're watching you. And so obviously I was watching my parents, and I began to realize in my 30s that I had this ability to create a safe space for people. A space where people felt like they could be vulnerable and they could share openly with no fear of being judged or having a reaction that might be scary from me. And so I really started to think, like, where did I learn this? How did I get this? And both of my parents were exceptional when it came to creating a space where I could come to them and say, hey, this happened, and just cry. Like, I'm also known for crying at my own events, because they're just as much for me as they are for all of you who attend. So it's not unlike me to see me at a retreat of my own shed some tears. I believe in the power of vulnerability, and I also believe in the power of the release of those toxins from your body. And I used to hold back a lot, but I truly believe that it's a very powerful thing for people to be able to see me in that moment of breakdown. And so I wanted to bring my mom on because she's a very popular guest. And a lot of my friends and family members and people that I've worked with over the years have had the opportunity to spend time with her and begin to understand why I am the way I am. And so we talk about raising kids and family because my parents were very intentional with how they were with us, but I think also there was some part that they didn't even realize what they were doing in creating that safe space. And my mom's been asked a couple different times if she would teach a class about parenting. But you'll hear on the podcast, she says she doesn't think there's anything special that they really did. And I would disagree. But I think when she talks about kids, it might, for those of you that are parents or have kids and in some way, shape, or form in your life, like I do myself, it will help you to realize that asking for help and recognizing that you can't do it on your own doesn't make you weak. It's actually what community and family and having kids is all about. So in this episode, she gives her top 3 tips for parents. And then we talk a little bit about networking, because I often joke that my mom's like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I think almost every job I've gotten in the past, or at least quite a few of my connections, have come from my mom. And she taught me how to build trust with people and create a network of support. And then lastly, we talk about being you and becoming you, because she has definitely been part of the inspiration for part of my business, Be You, the Inner Circle, which is a membership for admin and real estate, and then Be You, the retreat. Being yourself and having people around you who really encourage you and allow you to be yourself is a big part of what I believe in. So I'm really excited for you all to tune in and check out Mary Smith. And if you have any comments, please leave them on the episode on YouTube or Instagram. She's on Instagram, and so I'll tag her in the episode when this drops. But thank you for tuning in. I'm really excited today to introduce a special guest. My mom, Mary Smith, is joining me here in the studio. I know she might be a little anxious, so just be prepared for that. But I feel like she's pretty relaxed today, so I think you're going to get here. She's ready. She's been prepared. So thank you for joining me in the studio.
Happy to be here.
Why don't you start out by sharing with people a little bit about what you do now?
Okay, I retired in 2019,
Yeah.
so I'm busy just recreating myself. Really, it's very strange to not have a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You have to really process that and figure out what your day is going to be like. It's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful to have a lot of free time, but sometimes too much free time is also sort of disconcerting. But
Yeah.
but I'm enjoying it. Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of crafts and a lot of visiting with my sisters and friends and relaxing. It's nice.
Cool. Well, I wanted to have you on the podcast for a number of different reasons to talk a little bit about the idea of being yourself, because we talk about that a lot, but you and I do just offline all the time. And then that's become like a part of my business and a part of what I know people know about me and what I'm about. But I also wanted to share your journey, because I think your journey and what you've decided to do at different parts of your life and how you've found what's next for you is really cool, and something that I see people struggle with a lot when they're like in transition and they don't know what to do with their life, whether it's going from high school to like what's next after high school or college, or their parents and then their kids aren't in the house anymore, and now moving from a career into retired life. Yeah, it's different. So can you share a little bit about growing up in Seattle and your family?
Oh, sure. And with the be you, I've even been thinking like becoming you.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, I
it's
like that.
interesting adding that other little edge to it because, when you're born, you don't have any control. You're born into a certain family. You have experiences in your life. And I was born into a large Catholic family up on Capitol Hill, number 5 of 6 kids. Had a different experience growing up than my 3 older siblings, which I think happens a lot in big families because parents tend to relax a little bit more with the younger kids, so they're not learning or figuring out how to parent. So I think for me it was a little bit more relaxed than for my older sisters. But I was born in 54, so in late 50s, a lot of freedom up on Capitol Hill. You riding your bikes, going up to Volunteer Park, no cell phones, no checking in. It was like, see you, be home before dark. So a lot of freedom that way.
Yeah.
And then I went to Catholic girls' school from kindergarten through high school. So I followed my 4 older sisters. And that was hard at times because there were expectations of, are you going to be this type of student? This, so you kind of have to just find your own little way amongst that. But that was a wonderful environment to grow up into, a Catholic girls' school, very small. My graduating class was 45.
45 people.
So, yeah,
wow.
yeah. So those were the early years. My parents were very caring, controlling, I guess I would say, in a way, my dad, because 5 daughters and 1 son. He really wanted to make sure everybody was safe. And so he kept pretty tight control over us. But I think he had the best of intentions, which I think all parents do. And they did the best with what they knew at that time. They both came from kind of hard childhoods in a way.
Yeah.
So I think they were new to becoming parents as well. Didn't have a lot of good mentoring. So
do you feel like even when you were a kid, you were really being yourself, like really? And because I know sometimes your dad didn't like it if people were loud or people were, do you feel like you were still?
I think I tried really hard, but I also had to conform to the guidelines. But
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, I joke about this with my sisters, but I think I really was my dad's favorite and my mom's favorite.
Yeah.
I think I reminded my mom the most of herself, and I think I had some leadership traits and everything that my dad had. And so I think it was a little bit easier that way because I think they appreciated
saw
the
themselves in
person
you.
that I was. Yeah.
And then you decided to leave the state and go out of state for school, which I know was
yeah.
also something that
no
was
one was
different.
happy with that at all. They were not happy.
Even though your sisters had gone out of state.
My sisters, 2 had gone to University of San Diego, but my dad was like, you won't like it. You don't have any family back there. And I said, I really want to go. And he was like, well, all right, so we'll give it a try. But he really didn't expect me to succeed, I think.
Okay.
I think he thought it would just not
Just
be a
be
good
too
thing.
foreign, too out of the norm. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was really nice. I went to a small Catholic college. And my first time, to be a co-ed environment, because I was in all girls school all the way through. So that was really a lot of fun. And I stayed for 2 years, and that's where I met my husband, Andy. He was at Boston State and I was at Merrimack. So I met him September 23rd, 1973. So we'll be going on knowing each other for 50 years coming up.
That's amazing.
So that was a wonderful experience. So I got to meet a lot of great friends that I'm still visiting and in contact with to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Then I came home and went to Seattle University for a year, and then I finished up at the University of Washington.
Mm-hmm. I love that you actually skipped around to different schools too.
Yeah, I think it's a really great idea.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
How did you figure out what you wanted to study?
Well, I wanted to be a teacher. So my older sisters, 2 were teachers already. But at the time, the counselor at the UW said the field is flooded and it wouldn't be a good thing. So I went into sociology and wanted to go on and get my master's in social work like you did. But at the time, I just needed to get to work. So with networking again, I started a job at a bank and worked in the accounting department. The president of the bank was married to a friend of my older sister's. We met at a little garden show, and he said, "Are you looking for a job?" I said, "Yes." So I started at the bank, and it was a great job. I worked there for about 5 years.
Yeah. And then when you and Dad decided you wanted to start a family, how many kids did you think you wanted to have?
Oh, well, I really wanted a big family. So I was from a family of 6. I really wanted 6 kids, and Dad had 2 brothers, and so kind of a little bit smaller, but I think he was open to that as well. So, but we did stop after. So Margaret was 4, Matthew was 2 when we had twin boys. So 4 under the age of 5. And then I thought, this is enough for us. It wouldn't be very fair to any more kids to really make it that tough. So it was a lot of kids.
Yeah, especially with the twins adding 2 at one time when you have 2 under the age of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was a perfect size.
So how did you guys develop like your parenting style? Did you have to talk about it, or did it just kind of happen naturally?
Well, let's see. Dad is very laid back, so really that was easy.
Dad's actually in the studio with us today too, by the way. He's off camera here being so nice and quiet.
But he was very laid back, a very good father, and you never know when you get married or decide to become a parent, how you're going to be as a mother or father. I, of course, had a lot of experience babysitting, so I knew kind of what I wanted to do. And then wanting to go into education, you have to naturally want to be around kids. And so we just, again, it's kind of you do the best you can with what you know, and then you just kind of go with the temperaments of your children. So we were very lucky. Everybody was very easygoing and really very... we didn't really have to do a lot of discipline. So, but we didn't have a lot of high expectations either. We didn't put our kids under a lot of stress. So we were homebodies, I guess I'd say. So we did a lot of things at home, but we didn't really put them under a lot of situations where they would be uncomfortable. So
yeah, I don't remember saying like this is what I would like for you to do. I mean, we joke now about how you always wanted me to be a brownie or in Girl Scouts or something, but I never felt any pressure to do anything in particular.
No.
And there's something about that I think is really key to kind of letting us evolve how we wanted to and how we felt. So we always felt supported in that way. People have joked with you about like, hey, would you please teach a parenting class? Why do you think they've said that?
Oh, I don't know. It's funny. Funny. I don't know. But I think my children are also happy and healthy. I think that's a piece of it. So I think they figure, well, what did you do? How come your kids are so happy and healthy? But I think you all had a really good education. You had a lot of really good friends, a lot of parents around that were very supportive.
Yeah.
Everybody was watching out for everybody else's kids.
Yeah.
And I think just keeping close track like that and really focusing on what's important with growing up, which is being happy and having a good and safe environment. It doesn't involve a lot of money. Doesn't involve anything else other than that, providing a safe and healthy home.
When you guys had to do different things in order to discipline us, or like if something happened, what did you do when you found like a certain approach didn't work?
I think just stepping back and looking at the child to say, what is it that's going wrong, or what's happening on their side. I think listening, paying attention, and then not being too hard on yourself,
Mhm.
thinking, am I a bad parent?
Mhm.
So the one I struggled with the most was Benjamin. So Benjamin really had some issues when he was younger with understanding what the expectations were of him.
Mhm.
But he was such a sweet boy, and I knew he was really a good kid. So I
Yeah.
knew he wasn't doing anything particularly wrong to be wrong. It was
Mhm.
just, he was just from a place he didn't understand.
Mhm.
But getting help. So we had help with our pediatrician. Dr.
Mhm.
Dassel was huge support. And Dr. Betty Jones, again, another huge support. So I think
Mhm.
asking for help, not being afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
And then having the courage of your own convictions, because a lot of people will give you, oh, you should spank him, you should this, you should that.
Mhm.
And you really have to follow your heart and your own intentions.
Mhm. Yeah, I've had people ask me like, well, what did your mom do? Because I've shared stories about what Ben was like and how he just didn't understand and comprehend. And I think really sharing with people that you did ask for help, you and Dad both asked for help, and you got help, seems to be something that people are like, oh, really? They didn't do it on their own. I'm like, no. I think parents feel like they have to do it on their own, or they're not good parents.
Yeah,
and it's just not real or true.
Yeah, no.
Asking for help and involving different people that have different expertise was huge.
Yeah, it's all a learning process, and
Yeah.
then just being patient with yourself and the children.
And I mean,
It's a
I
big
remember when Ben was seeing Dr. Betty, and we all had to go as a family, and because she wanted to see how did we all interact, what piece did we all kind of play in it. And I remember that being fun. I don't ever remember feeling any sort of shame about it or anything about Ben other than he needed help. I didn't, in growing up with that, I didn't feel anything but that, well, that's cool. Everybody needs, I think different people put it in a place where it seems like it's not okay. And it really is okay.
No, and sometimes an outside opinion is very objective. They're not within the family.
Yeah.
And they can see something that you might be missing.
Yeah.
It's always good to ask for help.
So this was the first topic that I kind of wanted to talk about because I know that a lot of my friends and people who I've worked with over the years have had a chance to meet you, and they're just kind of like, Mary and Andy could do no wrong. They're like the perfect parents. And I say, oh, well, yeah, I'm blessed in so many different ways, and I want them to know that you are human too, and you've had to work really hard, and you guys have had your own struggles. So what do you think are your top like 2 or 3 parenting tips you would have to say to sum up kind of what we've talked about with just parenting?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I've really come to realize even as I've gotten older is that life is messy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the very first thing. Life is really messy.
It's not clean.
It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be right all the time. And you have to accept that and really just go with it. Relationships can be messy. And so you really have to give yourself a lot of extra space to deal with that. And then patience. And then also assume nothing. I've gotten myself into a lot of trouble before assuming something, assuming someone feels a certain way, and really assume nothing, patience, and that life is messy.
Yeah, I love, it makes me think of that book, The 4 Agreements, that I read and I shared with you about don't assume anything and take nothing personally. That was a big one for me too. Yeah.
And have fun. I mean, really, we have such little time. Really have to have fun. And that was something I miss the most about having you guys at home and being a parent is just all the fun. Whatever it was, you were always so welcoming with your friends, and I've always felt accepted amongst your friends, and that was really special to me.
Yeah, they still love sending you text messages.
Yeah, they still send me Christmas cards.
Christmas cards, yes.
It's really nice. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But my feelings for everyone are very genuine. And I think people can tell that. I think kids can tell that if you're genuine.
Oh, yeah. I think that's absolutely part of what also made you so approachable in high schools. When you worked at Ingram High School or we worked at the different schools you were at is when people feel that sincerity. It's kind of like a sunshine. They just feel drawn to it. Yeah.
My favorite part of the day at Ingram was just with the kids. And it didn't have to be a good experience. Sometimes it wasn't a pleasant experience. Someone was sent to the office. But it was like I was there for them, whatever was happening. And it was good.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about networking and being you, because that's something else that I've gotten questions about in doing my retreats and doing the different things that I'm doing, and just the people that I meet and how do I get these connections. I've literally had people come up to me and say, will you please teach me how you network? And I'm like, okay, I think I should develop some sort of a class around this. But to me, it just is natural. And I do feel like I learned it a lot from you and Dad. And that is really it doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or how you feel like you get your energy. It's all about how you connect with people. And do you listen? Do you follow up with them? And do you follow through to build that trust? And so how have you approached networking since you were young? Like, do you feel like you learned that from one of your parents or?
Well, I think my dad was a big networker.
Yeah.
So he was in the real estate business, and he, did some work for the Archdiocese of Seattle, but he had a lot of business friends and a lot of social friends that he golfed with. And I think through all those different friends, he had different connections within the city. And he was Seattle born and raised. I'm Seattle born and raised. You are third generation Seattle native. And it makes a difference when you know a little bit about the city and about your community. Your work at the Seattle Art Museum, you got to know a lot of the older Seattleites, and it makes a difference. So early on, because I was involved in so many different activities, between being involved at school when you were growing up, being involved in the PTA, then when I joined the school district, being involved in the union, and then teaching Sunday school at church, other friends and networking, I just got to know a lot of people. And because I think I was open to it, people got to know me or considered me a friend. I have a lot of friends, a lot of friends. But I think it makes a difference, and your circle just gets wider and wider, and then you just share your connections, and then everything makes a difference. When Rob was running for city council, he wanted me on his team as his Aunt Mary because he knew of my reputation with the school district and that I was well known with the union, and I had worked at 4 different schools, and my children had been at 3 different schools. So between those 7 schools, I had a lot of connections within the district. So,
yeah, and it makes a lot of sense that when people see you and they identify you with safety and trust, and you can,
it's very familiar, and I think people feel more comfortable when at least something little is familiar.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He also had me thinking, and I've thought about this yesterday. I was talking to somebody about how when you match people up too, you also, like when you refer somebody to somebody else, there's something there about, that the person who has the need, what they need, and the person who can give it, that it will fulfill the need, and that you're not just tossing somebody, like that piece of paper. You're not just tossing somebody at somebody else. It actually is a connection that makes sense. And I've realized too that every time I connect to someone, because I know each side and I know how it fits together like a puzzle piece, they get what they need. And then they recognize, oh, Margaret really heard me. She really saw me. She knows what I needed. And there's something there too about how you actually match people up that really makes a lot of sense too. Yeah, I always joke, and I share this with people, that you're like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like we'll be walking around Green Lake or someplace local, and there's always going to be somebody that you run into.
I know. My sisters always joke about that too, especially my sister Carrie, because inevitably we will run into someone wherever whether we're in Snohomish or Renton or anywhere.
And I've definitely started to experience the same thing in the last, I would say, like 10 years after I established my career in the area and really started to build out my network. And I love it because, like you said, it's every time you widen your circle, you also widen the possibility for opportunities, but also for friendship, for partnerships, for love, for more of like a bigger community. It's nothing but really beautiful, positive things, I think. And it also keeps you from isolating yourself. I see a lot of people that just isolate themselves by not opening up to, doesn't mean you have to be tight friends with everybody, but with community, it can look like a number of different people.
That's one of the things with retiring. Your circle gets a lot smaller, so you really have to work at it to get back out there and meet new people or just start new things. Because it's hard, because after having a schedule for so many years, I was with the district 27 years, and
and you were up
I was up at 5
in the morning,
and home at 5, so a large part of my day was very scheduled. Very busy, seeing a lot of people, and so it was a big adjustment for me. I was pretty surprised because everybody's like, "Oh, retirement, it's gonna be wonderful."
And then you also retired right before COVID hit, and so that also added, I know, to the isolation for everybody. Is like, not only are you retired, but you really can't even do anything yet.
Right.
You can't even volunteer yet. You had just started volunteering at the Ronald McDonald House. How has that helped or changed, kind of?
Oh, I love volunteering at Ronald McDonald. It's a wonderful organization. I mean, I'm just so impressed by what they do. And it's been really interesting to meet the families that are there with
Yeah.
their children at Children's Hospital, and what they're going through. And so I'm just a very small part of it. I just work at the front desk, but I love it. So I hope to get more involved at Ronald McDonald.
And that's just one day a week right now?
Just Sunday nights, yeah.
Okay. Have there been other things that you've thought about doing that you haven't done yet?
Nothing else so far,
Nothing
but
that's,
I'd really like
sparked
to
your
focus
interest?
in on that.
Well, you have been writing some books.
Yes, I've been writing books.
How's that been?
That's been exciting. Yes, I wrote a family story about my mother's side of the family. So her father, Charles Peabody, was the oldest of 8 sons. So I told the story of the Peabody brothers. And that was a lot of fun. Took me probably 2 years to write it. A lot of research on ancestry, and I called a bunch of the cousins and chatted with them, and got some really interesting stories. So it was a lot of fun.
Did you ever think you were going to do a writing project like that?
No, I really didn't. I really didn't. I mean, I've always loved to write. I've written little things, along the years, but nothing like a book. And then I put together a cookbook, which was really fun with lots of photos. And so I think I'll do another one, another little story with little stories about the family.
Oh, yeah. I think talking about how you didn't really think you were going to write a book, or I know you thought that your skill set was different than your sisters. Your sisters were in it, multiple languages.
More academic. Yes.
Really academic. But I think it's important to share that anybody can write a book. Anybody can do anything they want to do, and not allowing outside people to say, determine what you're going to do. So I loved that you did it anyways.
And I got a lot of help too.
Again,
I asked for help with editing, help with the pictures, help with organizing, help with choosing what voice to even read the book in. And it was wonderful. So you just have to ask for help and say, I'm doing this project. Can you help me?
And then you self-published it, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah. So kind of along the same lines as the tips that you gave for parenting, what are 2 tips that you have for people who want to learn how to network and build relationships better? Is that, again, that question I get usually, I get it in relationship to, how do I get these large speakers to come to my events? How do I gain connections to people that relationships that I've built over the years, like Susan Scott, and May Mangles? What would you recommend for people that really don't know?
I guess put yourself out there in a way, but I've watched you network with someone at the coffee shop. I mean, it's any opportunity, any person. You never really know who it is you're talking to. So just networking with everyone, I think, is the best, and being open to it. Or with all the social media stuff, asking for help. I'm looking for someone to do a podcast. I'm looking for someone to help me with my book. So
would you say, I always say when I am talking to someone, I never assume who they know or don't know, or I'm not talking to them looking for them to give me something. I'm just getting to know them. And then it's through this process of getting to know so many different people that you find, oh, wow, you have a connection to Kevin Bacon. Oh, wow, you have a connection to. And then you find out all this information. And so while building a relationship, you see how you can help each other out. But I find that when people come in or they want to network with me and their motivation is to get something, I'm not inclined to want to build a relationship with them if you're just looking for something from me. So I do think that how you approach people also matters, because people then can feel that intentionality.
Yeah, my connection with Ronald McDonald came through a parent at Ingram High School who was very active in volunteering. And I was just chatting with her one day. Ruth, what other things do you do? And she said, oh, I love my job at Ronald McDonald's. Tell me about it. So then she was my referral into the volunteer manager. So it just happened. Took a couple of years to get in there.
Because you have to have the whole process that they have for vetting people. And I know that was how I got my job at the Seattle Art Museum, was through Kathleen, another Kathleen in my life, who you had worked on the PTA with. Yeah, and so that's where I really began to learn and take you up on different opportunities to meet different people. I realized, okay, this social capital thing really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does.
One of the last questions I had around kind of networking, but also being yourself, I feel like you inadvertently kind of taught me how to create a safe space for people, because that's one of the things that people talk about when they come into BU, the inner circle, or they coach with me, or they come to my retreat. They say, wow, I don't know why, but this feels so safe. It feels so safe that I can actually share what I want to share, and it changes the tone of the event or the tone of the meeting or whatever it might be, because then when the truth comes out, we actually have something to work with. And so creating a safe space seems to be something that I do. And I feel like you did that for us at home and you did that for people at school. How do you think you did that? Are you conscious of doing that?
Well, yeah,
Was it
I think
intentional?
it's being casual. Yes.
Okay,
I think
being
it's
casual.
Yeah.
I love that, being casual.
It's true. It's
What do
really
you
true.
mean?
You just be casual, and it's like the sharing that I made you
Yeah.
guys do around the table when,
Yeah.
especially with the boys. I mean,
Yeah.
you were better at
Yeah.
sharing, but the
Oh,
boys,
I was better? Really?
yeah, it's just
Okay.
like sharing and caring
And making it casual.
and making it casual. And so you just start talking and you share yourself. And I've seen you do it a bunch of times. And then people are like, wow, I think I could share something, or I think this is a
So not
safe
making
spot.
it, not building it up to be something.
No, and not being pretentious with large vocabulary, that
Yes.
a lot of people like to throw around large vocabulary, like that makes them more important, or it makes
Yes.
them
True.
well read or something, and it's very pretentious.
So making it more attainable, approachable, and like it's not. Yeah, I think I think people feel when they share things, and sometimes people share very intimate things and things that have happened to them, trauma and their background, which I think is why I was drawn to social work, because people seem to just tell me things, but helping them to understand that they have a place where they can share something and they're not going to be judged for it. I'm not going to say this is what you should do. Just having a place to voice it seems to be what people want. Yeah.
One thing I really like to do if I have the opportunity is to have arts and crafts along with a discussion, because I find adults at whatever age still like to muck around, to make something, to watercolor, to do. And I find if people are relaxed and doing something with their hands, they're more relaxed to chat as well.
Yeah.
So you have some really good conversations because you're doing something with your hands as well as chatting.
I feel like that's something that Ben did when he was in school too, right?
Yeah,
Always
definitely.
Eventually had to get to a place where his teachers were okay with him doing something because he could focus for longer.
Yeah.
So you're very observant and you're very intuitive. What do you observe people are missing when they work with kids? You've talked about that a little bit, but like while parenting or teaching, what are they missing?
I think listening is the big thing. I think we get so focused sometimes on teaching or showing or doing, and then you're not really listening to or looking to see what's really happening with the kids. Same with parenting. You just have to really listen and watch and see what's going on.
Yeah. How, if somebody doesn't recognize that they're not listening, what could they do to kind of practice it? Or do you have any recommendations for?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I'd have any recommendations other than really practicing it. I think that's probably the best thing.
Something that I've had people do when I recognize that I'm talking to someone who maybe doesn't really know that they're not listening. I'll say, hey, for the next week until we meet again, can you just pay attention, like write a Post-it note, wear a bracelet, whatever you got to do to remember it. But I want you to listen 90% of the time or 95% of the time, make it feel really extreme, and only talk 5%. And they're like,
yeah, that's true.
What? And I'm like, I just want you to play with it for just a week and see what happens. And usually what happens is they come back to me and they're like, wow, so-and-so told me all this stuff that I hadn't heard was happening in their school. Like it's their kid, or maybe something at work, an employee that they work with was actually honest with them about something. And it's a really cool exercise, because for someone who feels like, oh, I just want to show you how to do something all the time or teach and guide, they don't realize that half the job of a teacher is really just to listen. Yeah. Because otherwise they don't get the message anyways. Yeah.
And with kids, I think is also getting down to their level, like physically getting down on a chair next to them, so that because you're not towering over them.
Yeah.
And so they're more relaxed, I think, that way. And then you might be able to find out what's really happening.
Do you ever do that with adults too? Because I've found that even in the past when working with different people, especially if I'm in a confrontation, like somebody who's angry or something like that, I've found that if I stand up, because I am taller, it changes the power dynamic, but also it changes how they are responding to me. It's interesting, the physical part of it. Yeah.
I have to stop myself too. Sometimes I'm thinking of what I want to say in response back instead of listening to what the other person is saying. So I work on that all the time too, because we all like to share, and we are thinking, oh, I want to remember to tell her this.
Yes.
So you have to stop and save it. So
yeah, which is hard to do sometimes.
But it's being respectful, and I think people understand when you're respecting them. I've told people some big things and have them just go on to the next thing. It's like, wow, did she not even hear me? I was really hurt.
Yes.
So, but respect, give it, get it. I like that one a lot. So I think if you give people respect, they'll give it back to you. Same with kids, anybody. If they know that you respect them and their feelings, they'll give it back to you.
Yeah. That's a big one that you just said too, about how when sometimes you'll share something and then people just move on. And I've definitely had that happen where like, oh, they didn't realize how big that actually was for me to share that. They didn't. I have to slow down and say, hey, can we go back? And I just have to tell you, like, when I told you this, it really was it's been taken up space in my body. Yeah. It's interesting how people don't notice that. But I think everybody has their kind of own agenda. And if they're not careful, that agenda will just run their life. Well, so one of the other things I talked about a little bit was I talk to a lot of people about gaining confidence. So sometimes I feel like my friend Kristen, I think I've told you this, jokes that my title should be a confidence coach. Because a lot of the times I'm just helping people, not just, but I'm helping people gain the confidence to do whatever they need to do next, whether it's have a conversation, start their business, talk about their business online, but gaining confidence and self-esteem. What did you do to build up your confidence growing up to start with when you were little?
Well, I think being your own best friend and your own advocate is really number one, because when you may have so many friends and such a big family, or be married or not married, but when you get right down to it, you are your own person responsible for yourself and what goes through your mind. So if self-doubt is going through your mind all the time, I can't do it, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't do it, you know, you listen to that all day long. So you really have to pump yourself up all the time. And I just say every single day you start again. Every single day you start a new day and you say, I'm going to make this the best day. I'm going to try something new. Maybe I won't get to it. Maybe I'll try it the next day. But you're definitely your own best friend. And you have to keep those thoughts positive. Sure, the doubt comes in, but I think you have to really keep it positive. I used to tell one of my sisters, it's not a very nice thing, but I'd say, shut up your head, which was really true. It was like, just shut those bad thoughts through and just keep on the positive. So I think you just keep the positive thoughts, and then the experiences that are tough for you, which I think you've done a lot of tough things. The more you do it, the easier you get. And you think, wow, I had a podcast, wow, I ran a retreat by myself for 50 people. So the more you do it, you just build that confidence. And it has to come from inside, though. Other people can tell you you're great, you're wonderful, you're good. But till you really, truly believe it yourself, it's not going to happen. So, and that just takes, you have to love yourself and be your own best friend. And
yeah, I think I can definitely tell. I wonder if you can tell when people are not their own best friend. Because I've recently had some people tell me that they feel like they're so alone. And I've said to them, well, technically all you have is yourself.
Yeah, that's it, really.
Like, yes, I have friends and yes, I have family, but I can't rely on you or dad or anybody else to be the one to say, hey, Margaret, go start that podcast if you want to do it.
Right.
I have to do it.
Yeah.
So I do realize that there comes to be a point, it seems like in people's lives, and for me, it was in my 30s, where you realize, oh, I have to be my own, best friend. I have to be the person who tells myself, you can do this. I love you. Keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, it's not money. It's not about money.
Oh, there's no amount of money that can do that.
Super smart.
No.
It's not. And that's a lot of pressure. When you're younger, it's like, oh, wow, I don't have the grades.
Yes.
Oh, I'm not as smart. I don't have this.
Yeah.
When you're in your mid-30s or whatever, I don't have the money. I don't have this big power job. And that's not what built it at all.
Yeah.
And a lot of times those are really insecure people who build themselves up with those kind of superficial things. So it's a long journey, and I'm still on it, and becoming you. I mean, it's a long journey, and it changes with each different phase of your life. When you're a young person, when you're in your 20s and working, and then when you're married and kids, and then when you're retired and a grandparent, you're still working on, what does it mean to be a grandparent? How can I be a good grandparent?
Yeah.
How can I be a good mother-in-law?
So we've joked about this before, about how I invited you to speak at the admin mastermind that I had back in Bothell. That was probably like 5 years ago now.
At least.
And I had you come in because I wanted, much like today, just have you share your story. And so I wanted to share that because that day you came in and you were, all of a sudden, it was like immediately, you were so nervous.
I was a mess.
Yeah. And what do you think happened?
Well, there was the couple of people that had this is bad vocabulary, but the resting bitch face, and I focused in on them, and I could not get it out because I am usually people like me. And so
Yes.
it's really hard when I get vibes from someone who's like, oh, she doesn't have anything to say.
Yeah.
And right away, it just ate away totally at my confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh, they think this is an older woman who doesn't have anything important to say.
Yeah.
And I brought a whole bunch of props with me because I
Yeah.
felt like I needed to have something to show,
Yeah.
to say this is a good reminder of, be you, this is how.
Yeah.
And you saved me. You started asking me questions, and then I just relaxed and answered your questions.
Mhm.
But I think I was so nervous, and then that one or two people, and I don't think they even had any idea that
Yeah.
their facial expressions were that way. But
Yeah.
I read a lot into people's faces, and I think we
Yeah.
all do.
Body language is a big deal.
Body language
Yeah.
is a big deal. But
Yeah.
yeah, you saved me, and that was really hard.
Well, I wanted to
really
share that
hard.
because I think it also then took guts to say yes to this podcast.
Yes, yeah.
Although you knew it was just going to be us in the
Yes,
room,
yeah,
but
yeah.
still sharing. And I said the same thing to Tom when he shared. I mean, we don't know who's going to listen to this. And so it's the same thing, kind of dealing with people's opinions and knowing that even if somebody doesn't resonate with what you say or doesn't believe,
Right.
that's okay. Because I agree with you. I definitely, it's nice when people get along. I like when people are happy. I believe that people can have a number of different backgrounds, perspectives, and I still like them, even if they're not the same as me.
Right.
But not a lot of people think like that.
Right.
A lot of people think, oh, somebody has to be this way. And so I thought that was such an interesting experience because I had seen you speak in front of hundreds of people before at PTA meetings, at school events, and all these things. And all of a sudden we were in a room with probably 15 women.
Yeah.
And that happened. And I was like, this is so weird.
Yeah.
But it made me think the first couple times I taught a class too. I remember there was one class I taught that I'll never forget where a guy for the first time got up and walked out because he thought it was a waste of time. And I was like super offended and hurt. And then after I read his feedback on the form, I was like, well, he's not in a place where he wants to learn or where he sees what I'm doing as valuable. That's okay. Not everybody's going to see that what I'm doing is valuable, or they might not be in a place to hear. But it's really hard to get that feedback and learn from it and keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate you trusting me to come back here and do that. I think that it reminds me of my friend Brandy Robinson, who's a member of the BU community as well. And she came to my class recently up in Everett, and the things she wanted to work on was self-confidence. And all of us looked at her, and she's got tattoos. She's got a cool haircut. She's like willing to take risks with her looks and with how she is. And I was like, self-confidence, you seem to have a lot of it. But no matter how confident people may look on the exterior, it still doesn't tell you how they really feel on the inside.
Right.
And so I always try to remember that. And it seems to be something people really, really want more and more of. So the other thing I wanted to talk about too was working with people and setting boundaries so people don't feel stepped on or resent doing things that they don't want to do. And I feel like you and I have definitely gone on a journey with this because we like to see people happy. I like it when people feel good. But I've also had experiences, many since I was little, really, where people took advantage of that and asked me to do things I really didn't want to do, or just had no boundaries with me and just used my skills or my talents to benefit themselves. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your journey with that and how you've set boundaries, because boundaries are not easy at all.
Yeah, I think for people pleasers, it's hard to say no. So you really have to value or evaluate the person that you're dealing with and decide, am I going to say, is this going to be a yes or a no?
Yeah.
So I think figuring out the personality of who's asking, and then if there's a pattern over time, then you say, okay, I'm going to just say no or be busy or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have a frank and honest conversation and say, I feel like you're using me. Sometimes I think that would be appropriate. That would be really hard for me to say. My parents always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I was raised. And so we didn't have a lot of frank conversations at home growing up. But I think setting boundaries is critical to keeping your own self and not feeling like you're being used. So.
Yeah, because I can definitely tell for myself that I feel it in my body if I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, then it doesn't even feel good to be in relationship with that person.
Yeah.
So it does seem like And I also tell people, I've certified in fierce conversations, but I don't walk around having fierce conversations with everybody. I don't think that's really appropriate, or doesn't mean I don't have authentic conversations, but I don't need to have a sit down with everybody. Because I think it also depends on how much of a relationship do I want to have with this person. And if I have a fierce conversation with someone, it's because I want to continue that relationship. And so it's definitely been something that
it's hard to say no.
Yeah.
But it's another respect for yourself, because you are your own best friend. So you need to have boundaries for yourself.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's gotten easier for you as you've gotten older?
A little bit easier, I think, as I've gotten older. But it's still a journey. It's still hard. Because you want to help people and you want to be there for sure.
The last question I have for you, the last kind of topic is, so transitioning what you've talked a little bit about from your working life to retired life, what else are you kind of envisioning for yourself in your becoming you?
Am I becoming you? Well, I think it's just open. So I'm open to anything. I'm in kind of a caregiving position right now with one of my sisters. So I'm working with that, and my parents have both passed, been gone for a long time. So as you get older, you transition into different areas of what you'd be doing with your life. But I'm kind of in a caring position right now, as a grandmother and a sister and a friend and a wife and stuff. So as you get older, it just gets a little different there. So I'm not out looking for wild adventures. I'm not going to start skydiving or doing anything like that. So it's more contemplative, I guess, in that sense. And then the book writing, and so it's relaxing, and it's actually very enjoyable. It takes a while to get used to it, though, from the fast pace of working. So, but it's definitely a different era. A lot of people call me ma'am. Can I help you, ma'am? Would you like a seat, ma'am? So it's like I don't feel that different than when I was in my 20s. But outwardly, I know I'm older, and I accept that. I have no issues with being older at all, but it is different to get used to. So. But it's nice to reflect. I feel so good about my life, and I feel so happy with how my life has been. I mean, I have a wonderful husband. We've been married 43 years. He's a great guy. He has stayed the same throughout his entire life. He's very easygoing, very caring, very wonderful. Sings all day long, does all the cooking now. I don't do any cooking. He does all the shopping and all the cooking. I'm really very pampered. So he reads out loud to me. So it's really good. We're in the middle of a big mystery detective story right now. So
on the Kindle?
Yeah. So I'm really enjoying, and my kids are all in happy relationships. They all own their own homes. They all are employed. I feel really positive with that. 3 wonderful daughter-in-laws and 7 amazing grandchildren. And so it's come very fast, though, I will say. I will say it's very fast. So any advice I would give to anybody would be just enjoy every moment of your day and take the time to pause out and appreciate it, because it goes very fast. So in the big picture.
That was the other thing I was going to ask you, is any other advice for people who feel like they're struggling and are not happy with where they're at?
Well, I always go back to faith, hope, and love. And faith, not in the sense of religious faith, but faith and believe and trust in others and in something good happening. Always be faithful in that sense. And hope, always hoping for the best in others and keeping hopeful. I think it's good. And then loving unconditionally and always loving, no matter what, even when you're angry, loving. So I think those are easy ones to just always live every day of your life that way, filled with faith, hope, and love. I think it's critical.
Yeah. And do you think you'll still be accepting the I love it when representative position?
I don't know.
Because you and Dad, that recent reel that you did now has over 2,000 views on Instagram or Facebook. So,
well, my statement for today, I love it when, is just I love it when I can share with you, because sharing is my thing. I love to share. It's amazing to get to know people in a different way. My favorite sharing when the boys were young we started around the table. I think there were about 10 people at the table, and we only got through one person who started cheering. He was like 14-year-old boy, started cheering about his grandmother and on and on, and
Who was
grandmother.
that?
And and then dinner was over, and it was like the best. But
it was one of the boys' friends?
Yeah, it was Dan Seidel.
Oh,
and
Dan
I don't know
Seidel.
that he would have really ever brought that up. It was in another thing, but it was like, wow, given the chance and the opportunity and the time, just sitting there, everybody's eating, and he's talking about his grandma.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
I will say that I think that's something that people have learned about me that I got from you guys that I now share moving forward is when I was in college even. Don't be afraid if you're watching the podcast. Don't be afraid to try this with people, friends, family, kids. You might feel super awkward and you might be made fun of. You might have people joke with you because I will sit around the table and I'll say, hey, can we all share something? And they're like, well, what do you mean? How do we do
People
this?
get nervous.
They
right
get
away.
nervous.
Yeah.
But when you do it and you have the guts to say, let's do this and be the first person to do it, people will follow suit. So like in college, I brought a camera my senior year and I said, okay, with girls, I had lived with 6 other girls. I'm going to videotape our year. And they were all like, oh no, don't do it. I don't want to be on camera. I don't want to see myself. And then at the end of the year, when I compiled the video, it was like their favorite thing.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be willing, I think, to step out first and say, let's do this awkward. It's going to feel awkward. But really, that sitting in that discomfort, it's really just the authentic self, like people having a moment like that 14-year-old kid when they might have, at the same time, I'm sure all the boys were like, oh, do we have to share, Mom? Do we have to? But if you move forward with that, it does make a difference.
Yeah.
And people still to this day come to you guys and they're like, can we share? Can we have sharing time? It blows my mind.
Yeah, it's a habit. So you becomes a habit or tradition or something that you do. So you have to repeat it over and over.
Yes, yeah.
That's a piece of
and
it.
make it comfortable. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for
thank you.
joining us and for sharing all the goodies. And for those of you that are interested in following my mom on Instagram, I'll put her handle in the notes along with her bio today. But feel free to reach out to her through Instagram and say hello. She loves getting to meet people that interact with I Love It When and me. And so, yeah. Thank you guys for watching.
Yes, thank you too. Awesome.